Welcome to the Limit Free Life Show. I'm Michelle Perkins, your host. I bring you tips, advice, and guest stories about creating work you love. Whatever type of career or business you have or want, I want to help you find more meaning, money, and happiness. Now we are live from Hollywood.
Hello, and welcome back to the Limit Free Life Show. I'm here today with a wonderful guest, Jeffrey Davis. And he's got some really wonderful, insightful information into building more fulfillment and balance into your life. And so I'm going to introduce Jeffrey in just a minute. And want to just give you a quick thank you for being here. We're here every Wednesday at 1 o'clock at the beautiful Sunset Gower Studios in Hollywood, California. We're broadcasting from ubnradio.com. And you can also find us live streaming from my Facebook page, Limit Free Life. So, again, thank you. We love having you here listening to the show. Limit Free Life is a company that I've founded dedicated to helping men and women to really create work they love and to find fulfillment, fun, and financial prosperity in their work lives. So we have a perfect guest today for that because he, too, really focuses on fulfillment and balance and has a really personal story to tell us about his journey with this. So I'm going to jump right in and introduce you to Jeffrey Davis. Jeffrey Davis is a personal fulfillment coach working with successful executives who've lost some or all of the balance and joy in their lives. Having spent most of his business career in the competitive and innovative advertising industry, his personal life revolved around his professional life. By all accounts, he had a full, fun, and amazing life with travel, love, and friends, but something was just a little bit off, and he really felt it the most when he should have been at his most satisfied. His personal journey began at a moment in his plush home in San Francisco's Pacific Heights, where he really got the experience of having it all on paper, but just not being fulfilled. Not knowing really where to go, he began both deeply uncovering and empowering himself so that he could live a life of fulfillment and joy. These were simply two words at that time. Their experience came along the journey. He blends his own innate knowledge, experience, and intuition with several modalities, somatic connection, and universal truths that provide freedom, ease, and power. So, Jeffrey, welcome, and thank you so much for being here today. I'm happy to have you.
Thank you, Michelle. I appreciate it. Thanks for having me on the show.
Yeah, great. So, I do think you're a perfect guest for our audience. So we have many people out there really looking to change their lives, and I'm sure a lot of them are going to be able to relate to a lot of what you have to say, and I think find some real help in what you have to say. So why don't you start by telling us a little about yourself and about your journey?
Sure. You know, I grew up with a set of instructions that society handed down to me, and they were handed from religion and from my parents and from our culture, and I did a really good job at delivering those. And I was always fascinated with human behavior and business. And so when you blend those two together, I ended up in the advertising industry.
Cool.
And so I spent quite a bit of time in the advertising industry, and I went from an agency into advertising sales and moved to San Francisco. Did quite well, and ended up in Pacific Heights, which is not a bad place to end up in.
No.
And you know, so I lived and owned a 5-bed, 3-bedroom house in San Francisco on the top floor, and
that's an accomplishment.
Yeah, it felt like it,
Yeah.
but you know, and it's a little embarrassing to say, but. You know, it feels a little first world problem, but it just felt really hollow. You know, I remember sitting there thinking, is this it?
Yeah.
And, you know, as I look back, I see signs along the way that pointed to things like that. I remember at one point in time, a good friend of mine, and this was a good friend of mine, we were out one time, and she said to me, I don't feel like I really know you. And I didn't understand what she was saying, because we spent a lot of time together. And now looking back on it, I feel like that was, and as I've done this work, I've had some experience of other people reflecting the difference in who I am, and how much more intimate they can be with me, and how much more connection they feel. Which at the time I would have never known, because I was surrounded by friends. I had lots of love. You know, it was fun to be around. And, you know, I had a good life. I had a lot of fun.
Right.
It just didn't really resonate with my soul, and I couldn't really figure out what the issue was. But, you know, because fun was a high value of mine.
Right. Right. It's a high value of mine as well.
Yeah.
Can you tell us some of the feelings that you were having specifically, maybe when you would go into work, and maybe you loved your work? I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, I did. I loved my work a lot, and I loved the people that I was working with. And I was in sales, and I enjoyed a lot of success around that. And it wasn't the work necessarily. It was when I came home. Actually, no, when I came home and I was alone.
Okay.
Really just kind of looking in the mirror, not actually physically, but just on some level, that quietness of the soul was disturbing to be with.
Okay. Okay.
And I couldn't really figure out what it was, so I just kept throwing things in to fill it. And there were good things, you know, friends, family, people. But I wasn't tending to me in the way that my soul was yearning for, and I didn't really have a model for what that looked like.
Yeah, interesting. And yeah, I think we see that a lot, where people just keep themselves very, very busy, and fill any void where they might have that downtime where they're alone with themselves and reflecting and getting confused by what's going on in their head.
Yeah, and I prided myself on being on the activity that I did, and on my accomplishment, and I was always on to the next thing.
Right.
And you know, I at one point in time, much earlier, much younger, my brother and myself were talking, and I was so thrilled that I had learned that sharks breathe when they move.
Okay.
And so, because I was always doing something, I remember my brother gave me this toy shark that we were both laughing, that was kind of like the energy that I was bringing into the world. It was almost as if I stopped, I would die.
Interesting.
Yeah, and it felt like that.
Right.
And it just felt, and I got a lot done, and I, you know, again, I had a lot of fun.
Right. Yeah, I find that really interesting because, you know, part of the, I think, appeal of a show like this is because people want to reach goals, and people are looking to get more done. And so, you know, it's interesting to hear that you can be that person doing that, and yet it's not enough. And you know, I mean, it takes a lot of awareness to stop and recognize it. So you obviously came to a point where you really wanted to listen to that.
Yeah, I did come to a point where it just started to become really apparent that something needed to change. And so I started a personal development journey.
Okay.
And the journey within, which is, I guess, on some level, the journey that I had avoided for most of my life, and that, you know, we aren't really taught how or what to do with that. And I think the real depth of that journey starts with a question. And the question is, it's a deep one and a simple one, which is, who am I? And most people answer that, you know, if you're at a cocktail party or wherever, who am I? Well, I'm an accountant. You know, it's an identity thing. And it's really much deeper than that. It really takes a lot of stillness and a lot of introspection, and pulling away all of the pieces that you think you are until you get to your true essence, and that's where you start to work from. And when you connect to that, when you connect to your essence, that's when you really start to become more joyful, more fulfilled, more purpose-driven, and as a result, you can still deliver the same level of success, but it's a different type of success. It's a different way of being. It's a different experience of life. It's a lot more fun.
And is it different because you have this awareness of who you really are on a deeper level, and so whatever you bring to your life and to the world is just more authentic, or what is the difference?
Yeah, well, you start to operate from a level of connection to who you are, to your values, and a level of authenticity. I mean, to get to where I was, it was really it's really not a direct line. It's almost like death by 1,000 paper cuts. It's a little compromise here, a little one here, a little one here, and you feel like you're actually winning, but you're actually losing. It's just a very bizarre thing, and I think that the experience that I had, that many people have, and the clients that I work with, is it's more symptomatic of our culture than it is of a personal experience. So it's not a reflection on anybody having done something wrong or made a bad decision or who they are. It really is our culture. I mean, you've got 1 out of every 6 adults on antidepressants. You've got a general malaise, and if you turn on the news or you're talking to people and you really get to how they're feeling, there's a sense of unease, anxiety, and underlying depression. And I sorted through those and on some level just kind of powered my way through the anxiety without looking at it and pulling it back, because it's uncomfortable.
Yeah. I think that's a little bit of a generational thing too, because and I've brought this up on many shows. For some reason it comes up, but the younger folks today are really pretty keenly aware of their level of anxiety and stress, and it's it's really there for them throughout their whole growing up. Really, they're just growing up with that as a part of life, and it's unfortunate. So I think
and that's not natural.
No.
It's in a world where we have technology to connect us more, where as that increases, people become more and more disconnected. I mean, it just doesn't really make a lot of sense. And we as a society are more disconnected from nature, from our human nature, from our bodies. And that's the other thing too, which is really interesting, is I noticed as I started to doing this work is that there's really a distinct difference in how I operate. And the simplest answer is, in business, your feeling state doesn't enhance your ability to succeed. Primarily in that way, and what we're taught. Most people are living in their heads and disconnected from their bodies. So and you can even see it in how people move, and there's you can see it. And so really in that space, people are not feeling, they're not connected to other people, they're not connected to Earth. I mean, we've got a war machine that is making profits at a cost for humanity. And we've got business that is destroying Mother Earth and destroying our nature instead of actually caring for that and integrating that.
Yeah.
And it's really a story of integration, which will lead you to more fulfillment. It's more of our business world and our culture is operating much more in a masculine energy. And that level of success, that level of political success or business success is much more in the head and much more in a masculine energy. And the feminine energy is being left behind and not being integrated. And that's part of the issue.
Yeah. And can you talk a little about that? Because, not everybody understands what that energy is and the difference between masculine and feminine energy, or the idea that, you can be a man with feminine energy or vice versa. I mean, it has nothing to do really with your gender. It just is about the way you're operating, right?
Right. Well, I mean, those are just ways to describe the level for instance, for the masculine energy, it's much more about a direction and a focus and getting things done and output versus with the feminine energy, it's much more open and receptive and feeling state. And again, almost the difference between living in the head versus living in the body and the feelings. I mean, the feelings are literally in the body, and your body is constantly communicating. I mean, sometimes I refer to the body and as the human experience as we're living in meat antennas. We're literally sending and receiving information all the time. And the more you tune into your body, the more that you can understand what those signals are, and you start to deepen your intuition.
Yeah.
And so, within the feminine energy, which is more residing in the feeling state, more residing in the body, you tend to have a deeper connection to intuition. And you don't have something that people refer to as a masculine intuition.
Right.
Right? You don't have intuition that lives in your head. And so that's why predominantly people will say, well, intuition is more of a feminine or a female trait, but that's simply just because of where people are living and the energy that they're imbuing.
Right. Yeah, and I think in business, that whole idea of bringing your feelings into business is so important, but it's never taught. It's always actually, we're sort of taught not to do that, to leave your feelings at the door and go to work, And so, I mean, I'm older, so I think things have changed, but that's at least what I came along with. So it's really important to bring your feelings and your intuition into what you're doing. And people aren't really that tuned in to knowing how to do that. So
and there are with everything that happens, I believe there's a one movement in one direction creates another movement in another direction. So with this way of operating in our culture, then there also is this movement towards emotional intelligence and integrating that. And as that starts to filter into our culture a little bit and into business some, then what you'll get is more of a connection, more of a supportive environment, less turnover, more communication, and more profitability. So the net result is actually positive, less sick days. And so not only does it affect the business bottom line, but it also affects the culture and families. It's powerful work.
Yeah, absolutely. So the people that you work with, are they typically, because you've moved from advertising to coaching, do you want to tell us a little about that transition?
Right. So I'm working with professionals who essentially I'm working with people who were in the same place that I was. So it's not necessarily somebody who is, it literally can be somebody who's hitting the wall, or it can be somebody who's looking for the next level. Right? So either whether you're in meltdown and you're trying to figure out what's going on, or you're like, okay, so how do I get to the next level? How can I make my contribution larger? What's my legacy going to be? And for me, I look at what my legacy is. It's a legacy of love. And so I think that the world actually needs more love. And really at the root of that, my definition of that is acceptance. And within acceptance, when people experience more of a loving environment, more acceptance, when you walk into the room, it shifts the energy of the room, and it opens and expands the energy of the room, and literally people's bodies will start to relax,
right.
you know,
right.
and it affects the communication. It affects everything.
Yeah, that's wonderful. I love that. And it would be, I think back to, work over the years and those corporate experiences even where there was more of that feeling or less of that feeling, and just the difference in those positions. I mean, when, in terms of happiness and engagement and everything. So, very, very interesting. So the people that you're working with, they're finding themselves in the situation that you had found yourself in. And
right.
So what kind of a journey do you take them on?
Well, to get to a place ultimately it's a place of peace, and there's 4 components in that journey: health, achievement, purpose, and relationships. And so in each one of those, to get to achievement is obviously already there.
Right.
I'm working with professionals who are highly performing, and they have achieved a lot and are achieving a lot. And but also that disconnection from body does sometimes either start to show up or eventually will show up as you disconnect from your body and you're just operating in your head and you're operating in this particular way. It starts to stress your body. And 90%, I just want to repeat that, 90% of all the illnesses that take place are stress related.
Wow.
So this is actually important work, not just because you want to feel good, but this is important work for your longevity, for your own personal legacy, and one of the things that I also help people around is relationships, because that's a big piece of this.
Right. Yeah, I'm assuming that with those 4 components, health was placed first for a reason.
Well, yeah, if your container, your body, is if you're operating in a state where you're adding to the disconnection, you're polluting your body with bad food choices or whatever toxins you're not aware of that you're putting in your body, even if you start to attune to your body, it makes that job even much more difficult.
Yeah, I think that's a place where many of us, including myself, drop the ball sometimes, because you think, well, after I achieve this, I'll have time and I'll tend to my health or whatever.
Right.
We're always kind of juggling those around and oftentimes putting our own health at the bottom.
Right.
So it doesn't work well for any of those other components, whether it's relationships or anything else. So, yeah, really important. It's similar to the entrepreneur paying himself or herself, first. A lot of times they pay everybody else and leave themselves out. So
yeah, and it although counterintuitive, and there's a lot of things in this whole process that are counterintuitive, but really, in order to speed up, you sometimes need to slow down.
Yeah.
And so whether that's with meditation or whatever that happens to be, so that you're not, your return on investment in energy diminishes greatly as you continue to run on fumes. You'll get it done. You can push through, and that's a very masculine way of doing it. But you can do it in a healthy way by slowing down in specific ways that'll give you power, will give you connection to your purpose, will improve your relationships, and will give you more energy and more performance.
Yeah.
So, yeah, that's really important to do.
That's great. Okay. Yeah, your energy is clearly very kind of calm, and I don't know if this is the same energy you ran around with back in the earlier days, but...
it's hard for me to speak to I can speak to my experience in life, but it's hard you can reflect back to what it's like to be with me, and so I can't get that experience.
No, you have a very nice Zen kind of calming effect, I think, on the room. So, Yeah, I'm assuming some of that is something that you have taught yourself over time.
Yeah, I mean, I've done a lot of work. I continue to. It's important. And so, I've worked with a lot of different modalities, and some I continue to work with. I mean, certainly, there's been an upsurge in awareness and also in visibility and people participating in meditation and seeing how that's important for performance. And that's a part of what I do on a regular basis. But there's a lot more that you can incorporate that'll give you more power, more energy, more freedom, and more connection to your essence. And so when you're connected to your essence and you're connected to who you really are, people aren't going to feel this sense of they want something from you.
Right. Right.
Like what you're reflecting back to me is somebody who's connected to myself, who feels safe, and who is speaking from an authentic place, right?
Yeah.
So that feels, people term it as Zen, peaceful, or something like that, but that just feels, ultimately, it just feels safe, and it shifts the molecules in the room.
Yeah, which would be a lovely thing to have in the workplace if people were operating that way.
Yeah, it makes a difference.
Yeah.
It does make a difference.
Okay. Wow, very interesting. So the people that that you work with, they're successful in terms. When we talk about success, I'm assuming financially they're doing fine or achieving what they want.
Exactly. So primarily they're at a place where they're doing well professionally. They're in a career that they either felt like they should be in or they wanted to be in at one point in time.
Okay.
Or maybe still enjoy, but they enjoy it in a way that may, again, still not be connected, and it involves change, and that's the other thing too that's really scary about the whole thing is it becomes a real courageous act, to be honest with you, to do a shift like this. So sometimes it's really simple, but it is courageous because you need to really look at places that you haven't looked at before, and sometimes that involves a bigger shift in terms of career, and sometimes it's a smaller shift. But it is a different way of being. So the courage comes in. I'm going to step into being a person that I haven't been, or step into things that I've been avoiding, or look at things that I have never looked at and don't really know where they are, so that I can come out more whole, complete, and perfect in a way that I feel connected to that. I do believe that everybody is whole, complete, and perfect. And so, yeah.
Yeah, wonderful. So, so is it overcoming the fear of change? That's a big part of what people need help with in that. I mean, first, I'm assuming they have to even be aware that there's a change to make, and then how does one overcome that fear? Especially when you have made it to a point, then the point you wanted to make it to. That's a difficult change. My dad made that change in the middle of his life, and it's a big reason why I promote transition in people's lives, because he made a big transition in the middle of his life to go from something that was very financially lucrative that he wasn't that happy at into something he went into, became a scientist, and it was really his dream and his passion, but it was a big shift in the middle of his life. And people were telling my mom, you should divorce him, you're not gonna have any money anymore, all these things.
Wow.
And it was at a time when men really didn't do that. And so it was, there was a lot to overcome, and a lot of social norms and a lot of personal. I don't remember him being fearful, but I would imagine there's that big fear of what if the next path doesn't take me where I want to go like the first one did. Yeah,
I mean, really what we're talking about is personal evolution, right? And so you may find in that personal evolution that maybe the job or the career doesn't feel like it fits as much as you thought it did. Maybe the relationship, or maybe the group of people that when you were in one state of mind don't go with you to the next place that is in more alignment with you. So that's where the courage is. It's really about, am I willing to select myself and tap into my true purpose and to be the powerful beacon of light that we all are here, and make a positive difference. And again, I'm not saying that people that I work with are not making a positive difference.
Right.
It's just the resonance of what they're doing and how they're operating in the world and how that feels.
Right. Right.
Right. And so, we're really talking about, on some level, a level of happiness, which is something that is unfortunately devoid in most of our culture. I mean, the United States is number 13 on the happiness index.
Oh, wow.
And 3 out of every 10 people can say that they're happy. So
that's not good.
So it's not.
Yeah, very interesting. And do you find that the people that you're working with can clearly say that they're unhappy, or are they just looking for more?
It's a variety. I've had people come to me distinctly unhappy. I've had people come to me looking for the next level.
Okay.
And, as a person, a high-performing person, the courage involved in making those choices to get you to that high performance can also be that same energy that propels you to make a courageous choice to shift in whatever manner it needs to happen for you to be much more fulfilled, much more connected to who you are.
Right. Okay. Yeah, interesting.
So.
I know before we were on today, we talked about mindset, and we talked about a little bit about money mindset and how that plays into people's decision making. What do you run into out there, or what have you experienced yourself with respect to a money mindset?
Well, money mindset is really around, again, it's around money as an energy, right, and how you relate to it. And so, and it can be a game within that you can play,
right.
and some people are more comfortable with that, and some people are not. But it's really, even within the money mindset, a shift like this will help you get to the next level, and feel great about it.
Right.
It wasn't that I wasn't making money.
Right.
It wasn't
right.
that I didn't have the fun toys and the fun stuff and the fun vacations and the fun experience. It was just that it didn't really float my boat.
Right. Well, I feel like the money mindset or your relationship with money can sometimes be a big part of the fear factor in making the change, or
well, the money is that's the first consideration in making a change. It's like, well, what am I supposed to do? I mean, I've got a great job, I've got this and that, and
right.
I've got bills to pay, and everything is structured. All the expenses are structured around a particular level of income. And so, I'm not going into anybody saying, hey, listen, you just get rid of everything and move to a monastery and you'll be happy. It's really, you don't have to necessarily give up your income. This is literally just this is an internal shift. You could even be in the same career.
Right.
But who you are and how you interact within that career and the people around you changes significantly, so that it becomes much more of a powerful choice than something you should have done, or a way you should be acting, or
right.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. And there are a lot of shoulds around money. I mean,
Right.
I guess that's what happened with my dad, because everyone was freaking out about the potential loss of income. So that creates a lot of external pressure on people who want to make a change. But
yeah, and money is a big deal. It impacts a lot of things, survival, and also impacts relationships. A lot of divorces happen because of money stress.
That's right. Yeah.
So that's part of it. I work with people around relationships. Relationships are a big part of fulfillment, and so I work with couples. I work with individuals, and I help them understand how to also bring those relationships in alignment with who they are, so that they don't feel like they're dating the same person, or they're with the same person, or they're having the same conversation that they had last time, and it keeps going circular, and it just doesn't feel like there's a level of deep intimacy and deep connection. And that's really where the joy and the fulfillment is, and the true love.
Right. Yeah, you're right. I mean, that's a huge part of fulfillment in life, and probably one of the more complicated pieces of the puzzle. I mean,
because other people are in it.
Yeah, exactly. So, and it is really interesting because as people grow and change, the other person isn't necessarily going, in that same direction, or growing and changing at all, or they might be growing and changing in a different way. So yeah, it gets very complicated actually, and I guess that's where a lot of the fear might come up too. That if you change, the people around you may have to change or may want to change.
Well, the reality is when you change, the people around you change. I mean, your entire world changes. I mean, people are not going to relate to you the same when you are relating to them differently.
Right.
And I found this distinctly in the ways that I was operating. So everything from my family to friends to people that I would meet, my experience of them and their experience reflected back to me changed dramatically, and that was simply just because of who I was.
Yeah.
And it just happens everywhere. I mean, I had last night I was at Cafe Gratitude, and the waitress came up, and we talked for a couple minutes, and now I kind of remembered her. And we talked for a couple minutes, and I said, "Have I not seen you for a while?" And she's like, "No, I don't think so." We couldn't figure it out. And she came back later. She's like, "I remember you." I'm like, "Really? So tell me about that." She's like, "Well, you asked me this question, and it changed everything for me."
Oh, wow.
And so, what happened was, I'd done all this work, and I had realized that we were talking about something, and she didn't go into detail, but I asked her when she looked in the mirror how she was talking to herself. And she said that just reset everything and literally changed her life and how she was working. And she was telling me that when she goes through a department store with her kids and they see a mirror, the kids will even do it now.
Oh, that's very cool. Yeah. What a great question.
Right.
Yeah. What are some of the other questions that people should be asking themselves?
Well, I mean, first, really, like I was saying before, the biggest shift is starting with who am I, and understanding that on a deeper level than, well, I'm somebody that likes this type of food and this type of music, and this is my identity. But like really drilling down on that, and that's a process.
It's absolutely a process. It's a hard one sometimes. I mean, who am I and what do I want? I find, which that should be the easiest question in the world, but it never is. Yeah.
Yeah.
So, what are some of the ways that you work with people to figure out what they do want? Because obviously, there's something lacking when they come to work with you.
Yeah, well, we do a bunch of different things. I work with people to really bring their awareness to where their blocks are and what's limiting them. A lot of times people have one picture of it and it's actually something else. And so we get to the root of that, and then I've got different modalities that I work with people to expedite the process to remove, and we all have trauma, right? Some of us it's much more visible, some of us much more, the memory of it is much more pronounced. But there's different ways that you can work with people to bring that up and release that so that you create more space so that there's a capacity to move past that.
Okay.
And then once we do that, then we'll start to really, replace that and with the information that we uncover during this process.
Right. Yeah. Very, very interesting. So do you find, one thing about working with successful professionals like you do is they are probably pretty good at taking action. So as they uncover these things about themselves, do you find that things move pretty quickly?
I do. You know, there sometimes there's a built-in resistance, and really, you know, the reality is, I don't do any of the work.
Right.
I'm literally there facilitating, offering information, reflection, and tools to get them there, and accountability for that process. And the tools are really powerful. They bring you into your body, whether it's breath work or movement, or we reprogram the subconscious. So there's different ways that we go at it, and it's really much more about attunement. For me, when I did the work, I really got to a place where I understood how sensitive I have been. And as a male, and really all of us are sensitive. It's just that as men, particularly, men will are in a culture where that sensitivity is not rewarded. It's actually penalized. Right. And it's even penalized in, you know, from all through their lives. And so then as they start to shut down, they lose the trail back to their inner essence, which is where the answers are. And, you know, they may hear things in relationship where he's emotionally unavailable, or, you know, what's going on with you, or just different things that where they're really not present to what the answer to the question is, because they have not really been thinking or operating at that level. Right. And so if you're not living in that type of world or that inquiry, then it's like somebody saying, well, you know, tell me the French word for this. And you're like, well, I knew that in French class in 3rd grade. I was really attuned to the emotional language in 3rd grade, because we all are, right? And so, but it gets, you know, beat, teased, culturated out of us as men, or in high performance business. And that's unfortunate. You know, it's reflected in a high divorce rate. It's reflected in, you know, some of the movement, the Me Too movement that's been happening, which is really the result of disconnection, right? And lack of communication, lack of attunement. Right. And so, you know, what I realized and what I experienced, and it was just my experience. It's not a judgment on anybody else, but my experience was, you know, not really an attunement. There wasn't an attunement around me. And so as I did this work, you know, that actually became my gift. You know, what was something that was dulled down, once I did the work, I was able to see that how attuned and empathetic and connected, and how much I can really offer in that area. Yeah, yeah, that's really interesting, and you do see that. I mean, it's so, to me, it's easily apparent that, you know, with men in the work world. So it's really interesting to hear that there is a path to get back to, you know, that more emotionally available, accessible person that, you know, you once were. It's just a process that you have to go through. You don't have to, but hopefully you would want to. It's the most rewarding work ever, really. And I say that not, you know, just because, well, I say that because I wish that for everybody, because it produces the most powerful, loving, beautiful experience of life that I can possibly tell you about. Wow, that's wonderful. So who wouldn't want that? Right. Yeah. So. Okay. And you find that a similar process will work for women as well. Yeah, I mean the process is the same. It's the same. Yeah. It's for humanity. You know. Right. Okay. And do you ever find that with women you need to maybe help them develop their more masculine side a little bit, or does that never come up? That hasn't come up as a request. What you know, what some of the results are for the work is, and I find a little bit more among women is some of the anxiety. And some of the results of the work is that the anxiety decreases. and depression can start to dissipate. And I know because, I had social anxiety and some depression. And so this is the type of thing that you can do that without pharmaceuticals will take you through that. And I remember at one point in time I went into a therapist and I said, I think I'm depressed. And it was kind of interesting for me to get what that was, because I didn't understand. I was just swimming in that water. I didn't really totally get that I was depressed. But I talked to him in the first meeting, first time. He's like, "Well, here, I'll write you a script." And I was like, "Well, can't we do something else?
Yeah.
Like, isn't there another way through this?" So that wasn't something that really worked for me.
Yeah, I totally relate to that, and I think it's really unfortunate that that's the first thing that somebody would offer you.
I know, right?
And it's great that somebody like you has alternatives, because I know there are alternatives out there. I know that, from my work and personally, and and those, are just, for one thing, they're more effective, I think, and they don't have the downsides of some of the prescription solutions. So
it's hard to find a pharmaceutical that doesn't also have a long list of counter symptoms and things that happen.
Right.
So and also really what you're talking about is a physical and mental and emotional and spiritual depression and issue, and also cultural too. It's not even just necessarily a person. Again, back to the water that we're all swimming in.
Right.
It's pretty consistent across the board.
Yeah. There is a big difference between, I don't know. I make I guess I have because I do have some mental illness in my family. I feel that there's true mental illness is one thing, and then
for sure
cultural and the kind of depression and anxiety that you're talking about. There are ways to treat it and deal with it that don't require the prescriptions, and you're far better off, I think, if you can go that route.
Yeah, and you find much less of that. Again, you find much less of that when there is a connection internally to your essence, and when you've done this work, and when you've done, you've come back to yourself.
Right.
That's where true joy is. That's where true fulfillment is. That's where happiness is. That's where the love is.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah, that's wonderful. So, wonderful for people to hear who maybe are feeling trapped or locked into a situation and feeling like there's kind of no way out, and they're just sort of resigned to staying there, which I think covers a lot of people, unfortunately. But obviously, from what you're saying, you don't have to stay there, and there are ways out that feel wonderful and that really change your life for the better. So thank you. Thank you for that, and very inspiring, and there's a lot more we could talk about, but I think it would be great for people to know how to reach you.
So my website is Jeffrey, Jeffery, Davis, Davis, coach.com. And so that's where you can sign up, or you can be in touch with me for personal coaching. I work one-on-one. I also have a group course that's starting in the mid-January time period. It's January 14th, I believe it is. And I'm also producing and in the process of creating a docu-series called 100 Ways to Love. And so what that is looking at is over a series of interviews. It's bringing up and talking to people about their experience in love, how that's changed them, not just romantic love, but all across the board.
Oh, wonderful.
So it's really powerful. I think in a culture where, again, we're taught something that is the flip side of what it is, people experience love as attachment or control or conditional. If you do this, I'll love you. If you don't, then I'll take it away. And so, really this is just an opportunity for us to shift the culture.
Fascinating. Yeah, I love that.
Yeah.
So that's something you're working on now?
I'm working on that right now.
Wow,
yeah.
very
so
exciting.
we're doing the filming.
Okay, that's great. That sounds wonderful. So, okay, well, thank you so much for joining us, and I really hope you will reach out to Jeffrey, and he's got plenty of additional information for those of you who feel you can benefit by being more fulfilled and balanced and joyful. So thank you. Thanks for coming on the show today.
Thank you.
And thank you, listening audience. We so appreciate you, and we look forward to seeing you every Wednesday at 1 o'clock. And you can reach me at limitfreelife.com, Michelle at limitfreelife.com. You can email me. We talked a lot about figuring out who you are and what you want, and I have a program that's launching called Clarity, which is designed to clear the fog and jumpstart your dreams. And so get in touch with me if you're interested in that, and subscribe to the show so you can get the weekly radio shows into your inbox or on your phone automatically. And we'll look forward to seeing you next Wednesday. Okay, take care.
All right, thank you.